Hello there, folks. My name is Spoonks, and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Anyone But You, making $8.7 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $27 million and a worldwide total of $32 million. Out of all of the movies released this holiday season, this is the one that is surprising me the most, as this is the antithesis of what you would see or expect to come out around this time of year, an R-rated raunchy rom-com. Like, that typically just doesn't really happen, and with its opening weekend it didn't seem like it was going to make that much of an impact and go the way of other R-rated comedies this year. But in actuality, this movie has been vastly surpassing a lot of people's expectations recently, as even in the daily numbers, it was one of the few films where every day the numbers just kept increasing, and that was really solid to see, and it carried into the weekend, so much so that it had the best hold out of any of the movies in the top 5 with an increase of 46%, which, for this time of the year, you would expect a lot of movies to increase, but once again, an R-rated raunchy rom-com increasing to that degree is absolutely insane. The word of mouth on this has been incredible thus far. People seem to be really liking this movie and going out to support it. And thanks to its $25 million budget, it has already surpassed it both domestically and worldwide. And all it needs to do now is get to the doubling point, which I think it will be able to. It definitely stands out amongst the crowd. It's solid counter programming, and given how slow the first couple months of the year seem to be, I think it's going to have very solid legs that could carry it to, at the very least, Valentine's Day if we're lucky. So yeah, overall, a very solid performance for Anyone But You. Certainly one of the biggest surprises of the moment right now. I'm very happy to see it turning around and picking up the pace quite a bit, and I look forward to seeing how much further this movie can go. Even if it's outside the top 5, I think this is something that some people should really keep an eye out on to see how much further it can go, how much farther its legs can go. But yeah, as far as how it's performing right now, it's off to a very solid start. Number 4 is The Color Purple, making $11 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $47 million, and that total stays the same worldwide as it hasn't been released in any international countries yet. So this movie was off to an excellent start on Christmas Day, so much so that in terms of Christmas Day at the box office, it is the 12th biggest Christmas Day ever, and the second biggest Christmas Day opening of all time. It tops Les Miserables, Daddy's Home, of all things, and Unforgiven, but it still sits behind the 2009 Sherlock Holmes movie. And yeah, with the amount that it made on that day alone, $18 million, it looked pretty impressive. It looked like this was going to be the big holiday movie of the season. Everyone was going to go rush out to see it, and it would carry into the weekend, but unfortunately, it didn't really capture that magic it did on Christmas Day. In fact, it actually kind of did the opposite of what Anyone But You did, where every single day on the daily numbers it made less and less. So it seemed like the film was very front loaded. Everyone wanted to check this movie out on Christmas Day, and that sentiment really carried into the weekend, as like I said earlier, it placed in 4th and didn't really make as much as an impact as I thought it would. I thought with how big and massive the Christmas Day numbers were, I thought, it would, the word of mouth would carry on. More and more people would encourage others to go and see it, certainly with that A cinema score rating. But no, it doesn't seem like a lot of people wanted to go check this out for this weekend. I guess it was just a case of everyone wanting to go see it just for the sake of it being Christmas Day, and then checking out some other movies, I think, because there is also another holiday musical out right now, which we'll get to much later. I think that movie kind of stole a lot of this movie's thunder in that regard, and I just don't think as nearly as much people were as interested in seeing this movie as a lot of people, including I, thought they would be. However, this is not the end of the run. Of course, we can still see this movie pulling off a Greatest Showman type run. It is still just the first weekend. It did get an A cinema score rating. So people do seem to like this movie. We're just gonna have to see how it plays out in its legs. If it can continue to, if it does manage to hold very well in the coming weeks, then I can see this going, well, it didn't have a great start, but it's having strong legs that'll carry it out. But if not, then I think this is going to be a pretty big disappointment, and it's going to need a lot of help as this has a really high budget for a musical, a 90 to $100 million budget. Again, with where it started, thanks to Christmas Day, it's off to a pretty solid start, but it's really gonna need the legs to help carry it to box office success. So yeah, interesting start for The Color Purple. It seems to be very front loaded at the moment. Hopefully it manages to grow some legs throughout the rest of the couple months. There is another musical coming out in a couple weeks with Mean Girls, so we'll see how that affects the movie. But yeah, interesting start for The Color Purple. Number 3 was once again Migration, making 17 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of 59 million and a worldwide total of $105 million. So like Anyone But You, the movie had a rough start last weekend. It had the lowest opening for any Illumination film ever, but fortunately, through the daily numbers, the film was able to find its audience, and like Anyone But You, once again, each day it was able to receive a bit of an increase from the previous day, which was very solid, so much so that it was able to become one of the top 2 movies of the day for a couple days, which was exceptional to see, and that carried into this weekend where it had a big increase as well, up 37% from last weekend, which is exceptional to see. So another solid animated movie is overperforming, and it shows that with animated movies you don't need to have the best opening to qualify as a success. It'll take time for you to find your audience, but you will be able to succeed through solid word of mouth and strong legs afterwards, such as Puss in Boots and Elemental did previously. And this movie looks to, while not reach the same heights as those movies, perform on a similar scale, as this movie only costed $72 million. It's definitely going to surpass that milestone domestically by the end of this week, and it has already surpassed that milestone worldwide, as well as the $100 million milestone. All it needs to do now is get to the doubling point, which I think the film will be able to do. It doesn't seem to be grabbing as much audiences internationally as it is domestically, but it is still in a good space right now. Again, it's the only animated movie that's going to be playing in theaters outside of the Pixar re-releases until Kung Fu Panda 4 in March, so plenty of time for this movie to grow and form stupendous legs. And even internationally, it doesn't even reach some countries such as the UK or Japan until February. So eventually, I think the film will be able to find an international audience there as well. So yeah, things are looking pretty good for Migration after a rough start. It seems to be finding its audience and forming some legs for itself, similar to a lot of other animated movies. Again, I don't think this is going to be on the same degree as Puss in Boots or Elemental, but if it could get close to either of them, that would still be exceptional, at least in my opinion, given how low the opening was and where it started at. To just get close to those numbers would still be rather exceptional, at least in my opinion. Number 2 was Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, making 18 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of 81 million and a worldwide total of $255 million. So while yes, it is still falling significantly behind the first Aquaman in terms of where it's at the box office, and was the only film in terms of the holdovers to drop in any way, shape, or form in the top 5, the film is doing better than I thought it would. At the very least, it only dropped just 30%, which is a lot better than I thought it would hold given the poor audience reception last weekend. But no, it seems some people are kind of interested in seeing it, and of course it's getting a big holiday bump given that it's the biggest movie in theaters right now. And because of that, it's turning from what could have been a total disaster to, at the very least, a bit of a disappointment, which given the expectations going into this, I think is better than expected and more than what people asked for. It is already setting out to be one of the bigger comic book movies of the year. It's just 3 million domestically away from surpassing the Marvel's entire domestic run, and worldwide it's just roughly 10 million away from surpassing the entire worldwide run of The Flash. So at least it's got that going for it, and like I said last weekend, it's seemingly pulling off a much bigger international audience. So again, like the Meg 2, it seems to be not doing so hot domestically, but really impressing worldwide. And given the $205 million budget, I think this movie is once again headed for, at the very least, a bit of a disappointment as opposed to a complete train wreck, misfire, dumpster fire like a lot of the other comic book movies, which once again, given the expectations going into this, is more than I think anyone could have asked for. It's definitely going to surpass 100 million domestically, probably by the end of this week. So we'll see how much further this movie can go from this point, because again, this movie is still not doing great. Again, significantly behind the first Aquaman, and again, with that budget, these numbers aren't the best right now, but hey, it could have been a lot worse, like way worse. So the fact that this movie is seemingly turning around into somewhat of a better than expected performance, I think that's more than they could have hoped for with this movie. And finally, let's end the video off with the number one movie of the weekend, which was Wonka, making 22 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of 140 million and a worldwide total of $384 million. So I think we all expected Wonka to overtake Aquaman again this weekend, but what we didn't expect was for it to take the number one spot again, especially over The Color Purple. Once again, given how massive the Christmas Day numbers were for that film, everyone just kind of assumed that Color Purple would win the weekend. But as the days went on, it was Wonka who showed much more staying power than The Color Purple, and thus it became the number one movie this weekend. I think this movie kind of stole a lot of The Color Purple's thunder in that regard as the big holiday musical you would go and see during this time of year. The word of mouth has been so strong for it. Audiences have just been really digging it and encouraging others to go see it, which is definitely interesting considering the cinema scores. This movie has a lower cinema score than The Color Purple, which I think is pretty interesting to see how differently they're performing right now, and because of that, it continues to be the biggest hit right now. It's just 10 million away from surpassing the $150 million milestone, which, once, like I've said time and time again before, it will be able to get to that milestone probably by the end of this week, and it's just less than 20 million away from surpassing the $400 million milestone worldwide, which again should happen by the end of this week. This is turning out to be the biggest hit right now, and certainly a much solid way for Warner Brothers to end the year. They're ending with a pretty solid hit despite two other movies not performing to the same degree. The fact that this movie is performing as well as it is right now is definitely a saving grace for them. Again, we'll see what happens with The Color Purple, but right now it's looking like, compared to the other two, Wonka is just the big holiday hit, and I think it's going to continue to do so. Again, we'll see how it performs compared to Mean Girls, the other big musical coming out very soon, but I think this movie's still going to stand on its own, still make the big money it needs to, and I think it's even got enough in it to crack the top 10 biggest movies of 2023, as it just keeps on going. It had a big increase this weekend, just increasing over 20% from last weekend, which is incredible to see. And yeah, overall, Wonka shaping up to be the biggest holiday movie of the moment right now, so good job. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this week. But we're not quite done yet, as we've got a new year ahead of us and our first new wide release of the year, that film being Night Swim. This is a horror film about a haunted pool, haunted water. Something's up with the water, and it's a horror movie involving a family dealing with that. Now, it's been a very solid year for the horror genre last year. They just really killed it, and I see this movie not being any different whatsoever. I think this movie is going to have a pretty solid opening. I don't think it's going to be Megan levels of success here, but I do think, given that it's been a while since our last horror film, I think I think the last one was Thanksgiving back in November, and I think a lot of horror fans are itching to see a new horror film, and the fact that this is not only the first horror film of the year, just the first new movie of the year in general, I think that's going to intrigue people. The marketing has also been pretty solid. I've been seeing a lot of ads and promos for stuff for the movie, and some people have been talking about it's getting sort of a buzz here and there. I think this movie could really overperform, but not to the extent of something like Megan. So yeah, not expecting anything great, but still very promising. A solid start for the movie here. But we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied? Unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all those social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.